At the time of the recording, it's not there yet, and they've got work to do. But as we and many others reported on Sunday, Arsenal are in advanced talks with Sporting Lisbon to sign Victor Gyökeres. They do actually have personal terms in place on a 5-year contract, and the player is extremely determined to join Arsenal. Mikel Arteta, as manager, understandably wants this wrapped up as quickly as possible, with pre-season training getting underway. And so we'll have to see if the clubs can find a common ground on a transfer fee. Right now, I don't know that to have happened. There are some suggestions on social media that it has, but that's not my information right now. That's not to say it won't change in the next minutes and hours and days, because it's a situation that's being worked upon. The wider situation is the search for a number 9 at Arsenal. It's been the talk of the industry, of the club, of that fan base, and all of us. And Arsenal have looked at many options over a considerable period of time. We've talked about Benjamin Sesko, and we'll speak about him more. We've talked about Ollie Watkins, we'll speak about him more. We actually broke news in late March on The Athletic that Victor Gyökeres is expected to be high in Arsenal's thinking for this piece of recruitment, for the specific position, and that Andrea Berta, who was then their new sporting director, is a massive fan of his. And that's ultimately the way they've decided to go at the end of a very long, intricate, detailed, nuanced process that took them in different directions and has had many sort of bumps in the road and twists and turns, and it's not finished yet. But right now, this is the direction of travel, and we'll see how it concludes.
Yeah, Carl, the numbers speak for themselves, and we'll talk about whether or not his style suits Arsenal a little.
Will be seen in time. He's clearly a really talented player. He's broken into the England squad. He's just 23 years old. When he's been fit, by and large, he's excelled for Chelsea, and he's got really high level, evidently. Otherwise, Arsenal wouldn't be interested in signing him. They are interested because they've long been looking for backup for Bukayo Saka, and competition, you could say, depth, especially with the injury he suffered last season. And with Ethan Nwaneri, he is being more identified as more a central role, sort of 8-10 competition backup Martin Odegaard rather than to the right. Madueke can play on the right, he can also play on the left, and it remains to be seen if and what Arsenal will do in that position, and it may depend on departures. So it's a plausible opportunity to explore, and they've managed to get personal terms in place. I never thought that would be the difficult element. They need to sort of strike a deal club to club if they're going to make this happen, and they haven't had the direct contacts yet. Let's see if and when that materialises, and if and when Arsenal are prepared to go to the sort of fee that Chelsea would want. So he's clearly enthusiastic about the move, if it was to develop, but he's focused on the Club World Cup at the moment. So I don't think it's probably, and he's playing well out there, it's probably not dominating his thoughts. And Arsenal will equally have some other options as well. As we mentioned previously, they have Brian Mbeumo as one they explored before this. Clearly there's a decent relationship between the clubs because they're doing quite a lot of trading now, and let's see how this one develops.
We've spoken a lot about incomings, but I mean, what about outgoings? There's players like Martinelli that have been spoken about that potentially could leave. What happens to Trossard if they get another wide player in? Talk to us, David. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's quite fluid. Look, they're weighing up multiple possibilities, and that's just standard practice. So the 9 situation is pretty evident. They want to bring someone in. Gabriel Jesus is still out injured. They've got their existing options such as Kai Havertz. We don't know exactly where he'd be playing. That one doesn't take a lot of explaining. The left is a bit more intricate. Obviously, Gabriel Martinelli is a fine player, like some respect on his name, and what you saw him do in the Bernabeu and on many occasions. Of course, people would want to see it more, not least him. But let's remember that. And if he stays, then I'm sure he'll grow into an even better player. And he plays for Brazil. It's no disrespect, but clearly, if you're going to bring in somebody of Rodrigo stature or Anthony Gordon or any of the other names that have been linked, then there probably isn't space for 2 such players. And so that's why there might be a possibility of a Martinelli departure. But I've got to make clear, I don't know of any movements or talks or developing situations. You hear stuff about Saudi Arabia, you hear stuff about Bayern Munich. I'm sure he's liked and admired everywhere, but that doesn't mean a move is materialising, and we'll report as and when any situation changes on that. Look, clearly inside Arsenal, there's massive admiration for Rodrigo in certain quarters. I don't know if that's universal, so we continue to make our checks, and I don't know of that developing. So there have been suggestions that he's prioritising Arsenal. I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear that players want to come to them, but it's not like the clubs are talking, to our knowledge. Maybe there's been some interaction with his camp, which is normal. You find out conditions, you express an interest, and so on. Similar Anthony Gordon, the price would be extremely high if he was to be lured away from Newcastle to any club. He's just a player that Arsenal like, and we've said that for a long time. So, yeah, we'll see on that. Then you mentioned Trossard. There have been talks to sort of improve his contract, and we don't know of them not happening anymore. So, maybe that's Arsenal's focus. Maybe if a great offer came in for them and him, remember, he needs to agree to a departure if he's going to go, then we'll see. But that doesn't seem to have developed either. It's been more of whether he's going to renew or not. And there's a similar situation, of course, with Ethan Nwaneri, an amazing talent, academy product who we understand wants to stay at Arsenal. But that doesn't always mean it's a foregone conclusion, because you've got to get the deal right, and his terms expire next summer. In one sense, they've got a long time, because, when he was moving from scholarship to pro, I don't think he signed until the very end, just before he was about to become a free agent, and he could have had his pick of clubs. But he wanted to stay. Eventually, they got the deal right. And so, on the one hand, yeah, clubs do get nervous when a player enters his last year, and many of them would prefer to sell than to let a player enter their final year. But as we've seen with Salah, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, the players have the power in that position. You can't force them to go. You could tell them they're playing in the reserves or something like that. But are you really going to do that? Similar situation at Crystal Palace brewing with Mark Gahey, their captain. Maybe he'll leave this summer, but maybe he'll stay and leave as a free agent in 12 months' time. The club might say, no chance, we'll never let that happen. But, they had a chance to sell him for 65 plus 5 million last summer to Newcastle. They didn't do it. Liverpool have shown some interest this summer. Whether that or something else materialises remains to be seen. But you can't force a player out. And he's their captain. He's their talismanic central defender who lifted the FA Cup and is a brilliant player for England as well. And so with Nwaneri, there's interest building in him. No surprise. Wouldn't you'd be more surprised if there wasn't. So it's clear that there's interest on the continent from Germany. It was reported by Mike McGrath in the Telegraph on Sunday. Interest from Chelsea that's been reported by Fabrizio Romano and others, and there'll be tons of suitors for him if he was to become available. But right now, I think the focus is on the talks. Are they going to reach an agreement? Arsenal want to. He'll be keen to stay. Sorry, I've got a barky dog here. He'll be keen to stay.
It's Ethan Nwaneri. He wants him to stay, David. He wants him to stay. We get it.
The dog wants him to stay. So that's a situation where a bit of calmness is needed to see how this plays out, and respect for an 18-year-old boy who has barely had a summer off with international duties at various age group levels. He's just been at the Euros with England in that successful campaign. When he comes back, I'm sure they'll hold talks and more talks and try and see whether they can go somewhere. If they can't and a move happens, and maybe that's why Arsenal are exploring some of these possibilities. Like Eze, for example. They've held talks with his camp. It's not gone club to club yet. He's in an 8 to 10 role. We've just said that they're looking at moving Nwaneri into an 8 to 10 role. So, it's just logical. There doesn't need to be hysteria about this. A player is into his last 12 months. It could happen that he leaves or somebody else leaves. And so you look at possibilities. It might well not happen and he stays, and the players that they've been looking at don't come in. Just chill. You
had it. There it is. The master of the transfer window, the best transfer news report in the world, is telling you just
Chill.
Chill.
Cheers, David.
That's probably where I should exit.
Yeah, good times, man. We squeezed you.
Getting it over the line.
It feels like, for the first time in a number of windows, Arsenal fans are finally going to get to see the magic number 9 walk through the door at the Emirates. It's been the position that they've been coveting. It's the position they've been desperate for the club to go and action. And it feels like, finally, we can start to talk about this deal getting closer. Now, how close is the question? We know that Arsenal are pushing hard and they are in advanced talks at the moment. There's been no club-to-club agreement between Sporting and Arsenal, but the conversation continues between the two football clubs. There are some reports out there suggesting that Victor Gyökeres has told his friends, yeah, I'm only interested in Arsenal. Arsenal's a team for me, Arsenal's a team I want, and that he's also made that quite clear to the hierarchy at Sporting Lisbon. Sporting, as far as they're concerned, I guess, Dharmesh, they know they've pretty much lost the player. He's played as many games as he's going to play at Lisbon. And what an incredible 2 years it's been. 97 goals in 102 appearances. It is simply phenomenal. Hence why now we're talking about this potential move. Maybe that celebration will be seen in the Premier League not too far away.
Yeah, just to add to that, Mark, Arsenal thought to be encouraged by the player's desire to join. Personal terms not expected to be a problem, but in a fresh development, Sporting have given Gyökeres permission to delay his return for pre-season. Now, we know pre-season gets underway for a lot of clubs, not only in the Premier League, but around Europe tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's a week after some of his teammates. That's when he was due back. So some of them have actually gone back a week ago. But he's now been given until Friday as these talks with Arsenal progress. And there is no certainty, given what you've just been saying, that he's going to return at all. Now, you did say, despite these talks being advanced, there's no club-to-club agreement just yet. What is it going to take for there to be this club-to-club agreement?
Well, this feels like a little bit of a grey area. Now, normally when we go into transfer negotiations or we're talking about them, we've got a bit of an idea about what the price is the selling club are looking for. Normally it's the first question you'll ask your contacts. Okay, fine, but how much is it going to cost to get this deal done? Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing because there were rumoured reports that when Victor Gyökeres went to Sporting Lisbon from Championship side Coventry, there was a release clause inserted into that contract that was €100 million, which is around £80 million. Now, he's 27 years old, and even the president of Sporting, Federico Varandas, has come out and said, look, we know we're not going to get £80 million for a 27-year-old striker. No one from Portugal is going to leave for that kind of money. So therefore, we have to be sensible, and we have to understand that actually, if we're going to recoup back some of the cash we invested and get this kind of sum into the club, we're going to have to soften our approach on this rumoured release clause. Now, there were suggestions it was around £59 million.
Yeah, because there was that rumour, wasn't there, that Victor Gyökeres had some sort of agreement with Sporting that he could leave for that amount of money.
Yeah, but gentlemen's agreements in football, rarely do they ever seem to work out. You hear about these things, and you've probably heard about them a number of times over the years between certain players and certain owners, but very often the agreement is always not quite on the same page. Now, we did say that we understood it to be 59 million. However, Federico Varandas has come out and said there's absolutely no chance that Victor Gyökeres will be leaving for £59 million in this window. So between 80 million, the release clause, and 59 million, the rumoured release clause, you'd imagine the fee that Arsenal would have to pay will be somewhere in between. You get that feeling that that's where they're going to be. It's going to be probably around 70 million, whether that's inclusive of add-ons or plus some add-ons. It's going to have to be that kind of figure to get Victor Gyökeres out of Sporting Lisbon and into North London.
Look, we have been speaking about this very topic for so many transfer windows, haven't we? It has been a primary focus for Arsenal to bring in a striker in this transfer window. They have explored the conditions